The hearing room buzzed with anticipation, every camera lens and microphone poised like a predator waiting to strike. Reporters whispered, their pens scribbling, fingers tapping on tablets, capturing the tension before it fully erupted. The air smelled faintly of coffee and anticipation, a charged static of political theater. All eyes were on the raised podium, where Jasmine Crockett adjusted the stack of papers in her hands, her posture steady, almost statuesque. Outside, social media feeds were lighting up. Short clips of the upcoming statement were already being shared, snippets dissected for sound bites, reactions building before the storm had fully hit. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through the murmurs. Kari Lake, fiery and unrestrained, leaned forward, her words slicing the air like a whip. "You can't just stand there and mislead people with that nonsense." Her tone was both accusatory and performative, designed to provoke. The room flinched, at the volume, some gasping, others instinctively reaching for record buttons. Crockett's eyes flickered toward her, calm but unyielding. She inhaled slowly, letting the interruption settle into the charged room like smoke. The cameras captured the juxtaposition. Lake, arms flailing, face flushed with aggression. Crockett, unwavering, voice quiet, but resonant. "If you'll allow me to finish," Crockett said, her words deliberate, measured. The simple command of her presence held a quiet authority that contrasted sharply with Lake's volatility. In the gallery, colleagues exchanged glances, a mix of admiration and apprehension. Online, the clip already had hundreds of shares, viewers, debating, laughing, some outraged, others mesmerized. It was more than an argument. It was the collision of two personas, two ideologies, and millions of digital witnesses. Every movement, every inflection, every glance would be scrutinized. Crockett's calm was a calculated counterpoint, a silent assertion that sometimes power speaks loudest through restraint. The firestorm had begun, but its trajectory depended entirely on how each woman navigated the storm of attention, both in the room and across the nation. The tension didn't dissipate as the room settled. It thickened, wrapping around every reporter, aide, and camera operator like a tangible presence. The background chatter was replaced by hushed murmurs, punctuated by the occasional click of a camera shutter. Jasmine Crockett took a deliberate moment, letting the chaos breathe itself out before resuming her statement. Each word was chosen with precision, grounded in public records, legislative debates, and policy analyses. She wasn't merely responding to Kari Lake, she was establishing a narrative of competence, reason, and moral clarity. Lake, meanwhile, had not retreated. She paced slightly, leaning into the microphone, eyes narrowing, every movement emphasizing indignation and theatrical outrage. "This is exactly why people distrust politics," she barked, her voice rising, echoing off the walls. Yet even as her words cut through the room, they lacked the weight of verification. The contrast between spectacle and substance was immediate, attention mirrored not only by those present but by the millions following online, their reactions streaming in like a digital tide, tweets, shares, and rapid-fire comments dissecting every tone, every gesture. Crockett's gaze swept the room briefly, pausing on reporters, then returning to her papers. "We cannot afford to misrepresent facts for political gain," she said, calm yet resolute. "Our constituents deserve truth, not theatrics." The weight of her words seemed to settle into the room, commanding attention not through volume, but authority. Each syllable echoed with the implication of accountability, responsibility, and historical record. The chapter shifted seamlessly into context, narrating the political backdrop with cinematic clarity. Crockett's statement referenced recent legislative battles, highlighting the stakes: a politically polarized electorate, high-profile media scrutiny, and the reputations of both women poised on a knife's edge. Lake's fiery persona was examined, alongside Crockett's meticulous, evidence-driven style, a juxtaposition amplified in real time by the lens of cameras and the immediacy of social media feeds. Clips circulated instantly, each frame a microcosm of ideological conflict, dissected by pundits and casual viewers alike. A subtle tension threaded through the narrative, amplified by minor details. A reporter's hand hovering over a smartphone, capturing Lake's flared nostrils. A colleague exchanging a knowing glance with Crockett, a silent acknowledgement of the stakes at hand. Online commentators debated the significance, some criticizing Lake's aggression, others praising her defiance. Yet beneath it all, Crockett's calm offered a quiet, unshakable counterpoint. The audience felt the psychological chess. Patience, restraint and credibility measured against impulsive theatrics and emotional heat. By the end of the chapter, the scene was set. The confrontation was not merely personal, it represented the broader ideological chasm in contemporary politics. Crockett's composed demeanor framed her as a symbol of rational governance. Lake's intensity highlighted the raw, often chaotic energy of populist confrontation. Every gesture, every pause, and every carefully worded sentence was a calculated move in a high-stakes public theater, a battle unfolding simultaneously in the room and across screens nationwide. The stage was prepared for the first true salvo of debate, a clash that would define public perception in the days to come. The room vibrated with anticipation, the collective breath of reporters, aides, and onlookers hanging in the air like a suspended storm. Kari Lake's temper, already ignited, now flared with visible intensity. Her voice, sharp and accusatory, cut through the chamber like a whip. "You can't just stand there and rewrite the facts," she snapped, leaning into the microphone, her fingers gripping the podium with white-knuckled force. "People are tired of being lied to by politicians." Crockett's calm remained unbroken. Her gaze didn't waver, her hands resting lightly on the papers she had prepared. The room seemed to contract around the contrast. Lake, a tempest of anger and spectacle. Crockett, a figure of measured authority and patience. She inhaled deliberately, letting the charged atmosphere settle just enough for her words to land. "The facts speak for themselves," she said, her voice steady yet resonant, carrying a weight that commanded attention without aggression. "And it's our duty to represent them accurately." Lake's eyes narrowed, her mouth tightening in frustration as she pivoted, gesturing toward specific claims in Crockett's statement. "You think the public won't notice? You think people can't see through this?" Her tone was a blend of anger and incredulity, designed to provoke, to force a crack in Crockett's composed exterior. Cameras zoomed in on her expressions, capturing the rising heat of confrontation. Social media feeds exploded in real time, viewers dissecting every word, analyzing body language, debating loyalty and ideological alignment. Crockett, sensing the peak of the storm, allowed a brief pause, letting Lake's frustration hang in the air like smoke. She adjusted her papers, her eyes scanning the room, briefly meeting those of reporters and colleagues. "I understand your concerns," she said, her tone neutral but firm. "But facts remain facts, whether convenient or inconvenient." Her words were not just a rebuttal, they were a statement of intellectual dominance, a quiet assertion that evidence and reason outlast theatrics and anger. The room was a chessboard of psychological tension. Lake's camp shifted uneasily, recognizing the silent power in Crockett's patience, while Crockett's allies exchanged subtle nods of affirmation. Every gesture, glance, and pause contributed to the narrative. This confrontation was not merely verbal, it was symbolic, ideological, and deeply personal. Narration flowed across the scene, capturing the cinematic contrasts, the sharp flick of Lake's hand emphasizing every word, the tense line of her jaw, versus Crockett's composed posture, measured breathing, and unwavering gaze. Commentary from reporters, both in the room and online, amplified the stakes. Some praised Lake's fiery defiance, others celebrated Crockett's unwavering discipline. The public, millions of eyes tuned into screens and streams, became an active witness to the unfolding drama, dissecting every inflection, every strategic pause. As the first round of verbal sparring reached its crescendo, the narrative emphasized the stakes beyond personal conflict. Crockett's measured response wasn't merely about winning an argument, it was about credibility, legacy, and demonstrating that leadership could be exercised without yielding to emotional spectacle. Lake's aggression, by contrast, highlighted the peril of letting fury drive public perception. Each word, each gesture, each pause was a calculated move in a battle for authority, respect, and public trust. By the chapter's end, the confrontation had crystallized. Lake's fiery rhetoric had ignited the room, but Crockett's calm, evidence-based rebuttal had begun to shift the perception of power. The ideological and emotional stakes were now fully in motion, setting the stage for Crockett's methodical dismantling of Lake's arguments in the chapters to come. The clash was no longer just a hearing. It had become a viral spectacle, a high-stakes game of intellect, restraint, and public perception, watched by millions across the nation. The room seemed to hold its breath. Kari Lake, flushed with fury, had launched her verbal assault, each accusation sharp and incendiary. And yet, in the eye of this storm, Jasmine Crockett remained composed, a study in patience and precision. She lifted her eyes from the papers, scanning the chamber with a quiet authority that demanded attention without raising her voice. The cameras captured every subtle movement, the steadying of a hand, the brief inhale before she spoke, the deliberate cadence of her words. "You allege misrepresentation," Crockett said, her tone calm, unwavering, yet carrying the weight of undeniable truth. "Let us examine the records, the statements, the votes themselves. These are matters of public record, documented and verifiable. And when we look at them clearly, we see a different picture than what has been presented here today." Her voice was firm, methodical, almost surgical in its precision. The contrast to Lake's fiery outburst could not have been more stark. While Lake's rhetoric sought to dominate, Crockett's approach sought to illuminate, to clarify, to assert authority through fact, not volume. Lake's expression tightened, a flicker of irritation crossing her face as Crockett systematically deconstructed each accusation. Every line of the prepared statement was referenced, each claim backed by evidence, press releases, legislative records, and transcripts. Crockett didn't merely respond. She constructed a narrative of credibility and ethical governance, demonstrating that leadership could exist without theatrics, without spectacle. Her calm demeanor was not passivity. It was power in motion, deliberate and undeniable. Narration wove through the scene like a cinematic lens, capturing the subtle drama, the slight arch of Lake's brow, the tense shifting of feet in her camp, the quiet nods from Crockett's allies. Reporters leaned forward, scribbling notes, their whispers nearly drowned out by the hum of recording equipment. Social media feeds were alive with reaction. Clips of Crockett's composed rebuttal were already being dissected, praised, and shared at viral speed. Commentary ranged from admiration for her restraint to astonishment at the audacity of standing firm while under attack. Crockett's eyes briefly met Lake's, a silent acknowledgement of the battlefield. "We are judged not by our anger," she continued, "but by the clarity of our convictions and the evidence we present. And on this record, the truth is evident." The words landed with a weight that transcended the chamber itself, echoing across the digital platforms where millions were now watching, reacting, and debating in real time. The ideological tension escalated, not with raised voices but through layered meaning. Every fact, every citation, every measured pause was a challenge to the spectacle of aggression, demonstrating that power could be exercised through reason, credibility, and poise. Lake's theatrics now seemed almost performative, a contrast to Crockett's authoritative calm that resonated deeply with viewers craving rationality amidst chaos. By the chapter's end, the first wave of confrontation had shifted decisively. Lake's anger had sparked attention, but Crockett's methodical dismantling of her arguments had begun to claim the moral and intellectual high ground. The audience could feel the psychological weight of restraint triumphing over rage, the kind of quiet, unwavering authority that leaves an indelible impression on both the public and history itself. The stage was set for the next layer of conflict. Witnesses, allies, and the media would now enter the fray, amplifying the stakes, intensifying scrutiny, and escalating the ideological battle that would define the viral narrative. The room, once dominated by the initial clash, now felt heavier with anticipation. Each observer, each reporter, seemed to sense that the confrontation had moved beyond mere words. It had become a theater of influence, a battlefield of ideology. Kari Lake's fiery demeanor had settled into a taut, simmering energy, her arms crossed, jaw tight as she awaited the next exchange. Jasmine Crockett, by contrast, remained a pillar of composed authority, her posture upright, her gaze deliberate, her presence commanding respect, without a single raised voice. The first witnesses approached the lectern. Legislative aides, policy, analysts, and subject matter experts began to reinforce Crockett's points, citing verifiable documents, press releases, and official records. The bill passed with a clear margin, one aide stated, glancing briefly toward Lake before continuing. All procedural steps were followed. Claims to the contrary are not supported by the record. Each factual statement punctuated the air, each citation a blow against the storm of rhetoric Lake had summoned. Lake shifted, her frustration now tinged with impatience. "These are just technicalities," she interjected, her voice rising slightly, though now measured as if trying to reclaim control. "People want answers, not footnotes." But Crockett's calm never wavered. She allowed the testimony to unfold, letting the evidence speak, each fact reinforcing the credibility she had painstakingly established. Social media feeds erupted in real time, highlighting the contrast. Clips circulated showing Lake's agitation against Crockett's stoic presence. Analysts weighed in on live streams, emphasizing Crockett's strategic restraint and Lake's inability to pivot from raw emotion. Public opinion, fragmented but engaged, began to reflect the psychological power of measured composure versus impulsive theatrics. Every nod of an ally, every carefully cited document was magnified through screens and feeds, amplifying the narrative beyond the chamber itself. The testimonies layered the tension, adding both intellectual and emotional stakes. Crockett's allies, seasoned political operators, subtly reinforced her message. Leadership demands clarity, accountability, and the courage to stand firm under pressure. Lake's frustration was visible, the controlled anger now a shadow of the initial blaze, while Crockett's strategic patience painted her as the anchor in a storm of chaos. The chapter also captured the microdrama within the room. A junior aide whispering a correction to Lake, a cameraman adjusting for the perfect angle on Crockett's composed delivery. The subtle exchanges between reporters taking live notes. Each small moment contributed to the narrative, reinforcing the duality of spectacle versus substance, of emotion versus reason. Crockett finally spoke again, her voice measured, almost reverent in its precision. "We are accountable not to our own theatrics, but to the public and the record itself. And when we follow that record faithfully, we maintain integrity, regardless of the volume of claims against us." The effect was immediate. A collective intake of breath, murmurs of agreement, the quiet recognition that restraint could command more authority than anger ever could. By the end of Chapter 5, the confrontation had entered a new dimension. Witnesses and allies had not only reinforced Crockett's credibility, but also amplified the ideological stakes. Lake's aggressive energy had begun to fracture under scrutiny, while Crockett's methodical, evidence-backed approach solidified her position. The stage was set for the next escalation. Media frenzy and public reaction would take the confrontation viral, intensifying the drama to a level that could define political narratives nationwide. The chamber's tension now spilled beyond its walls, spilling into living rooms, social media feeds, and newsrooms nationwide. Reporters in the room exchanged rapid glances, fingers flying across keyboards, capturing sound bites and framing each movement for the world to see. Television cameras broadcast live angles of Kari Lake's rising agitation, contrasting sharply with Jasmine Crockett's composed, unflinching demeanor. Every subtle expression, every pause, every gesture was amplified through the lens, reaching millions before the final words had even landed. Lake's voice, though still sharp, now carried an undertone of frustration. "You think this proves anything? People want action, not lectures." Her hands sliced through the air, emphasizing her points while Crockett remained unmoved. letting the room's charged energy settle over her like a controlled tide. "Facts are not lectures," Crockett replied quietly, her voice calm, yet unmistakably firm. "They are the foundation of trust and accountability." The contrast could not have been more pronounced, and viewers online immediately noticed. Social media erupted. Clips of the exchange went viral within minutes, hashtags trending across platforms, influencers analyzing body language, political commentators debating tone, and viewers dissecting the ideological stakes. Tweets flew, some praising Lake's fiery passion, others hailing Crockett's unwavering restraint. On live streams, pundits dissected each nuance, comparing aggression to strategy, anger to composure, spectacle to substance. The room itself seemed suspended in the digital echo, aware that every word was already a public event, magnified beyond control. Narration highlighted the cinematic tension, cameras zooming in on Lake's flushed face, her jaw tight with frustration, the shifting weight of her stance betraying impatience. Crockett, steady and deliberate, eyes scanning the audience, hands lightly resting on the podium, voice measured but resonant. Even minor details, the flutter of a notepad, the nervous glance of an aide, the click of recording equipment, were imbued with symbolic weight. Every action became a narrative beat contributing to the unfolding spectacle. Crockett's response was strategic, an anchor amidst the storm. "Our duty is not performance," she stated, voice calm, eyes unwavering. "It is service to the public, guided by evidence, guided by integrity. Anger fades, theatrics fade, but the truth remains." The words landed with gravity, carried not by volume but by authority. Social media users quickly highlighted the contrast. Anger dominates headlines briefly, but measured authority leaves a lasting imprint. Lake's agitation began to manifest, in subtle ways. Clenched fists, shifting feet, a tightening jaw. Her theatrics, once dominating the room, now felt amplified by Crockett's composure, as if the calm had transformed into a mirror, reflecting the futility of rage. Every online reaction, every viral clip, reinforced the narrative. Restraint carried power, evidence carried authority, and emotional discipline commanded respect in a way that raw anger never could. By the end of the chapter, the confrontation had fully transcended the hearing room. The story was now national, viral, and emotionally charged, capturing millions of viewers simultaneously. The media frenzy was no longer incidental. It was a force that elevated the stakes, making every move, every word, every reaction part of a larger ideological and emotional spectacle. Crockett's calm had become her weapon, Lake's fury her own undoing, and the stage was set for the next escalation. The ideological clash intensifies, forcing both figures into even higher stakes confrontation in front of a captivated nation. The chamber felt electric, every eye in the room trained on the two women as if anticipating the next eruption. The public's gaze, magnified through live streams and social media feeds, hung just as heavily over the proceedings. Kari Lake's energy, once raw and uncontained, now carried a sharpened edge of ideology. Her fury now channeled into pointed accusations and rhetorical jabs designed to provoke both Crockett and the audience. "You don't understand what people are feeling," she snapped, voice tight but forceful. "You're so focused on rules and procedures you've lost touch with the realities we face." Crockett listened, her expression neutral, a calm counterweight to the whirlwind of anger before her. She allowed Lake's words to hang in the air for a moment, letting the ideological tension swell. The room seemed to expand and contract with every word charged with the silent energy of anticipation. "I understand more than you think," Crockett replied, her voice measured, deliberate. "Understanding is not enough if it isn't accompanied by action rooted in integrity, guided by evidence and accountable to the public record." Her words resonated through the chamber, like a slow, controlled current cutting through a storm. Lake's hand sliced through the air as she leaned forward, emphasizing her point. "The people are tired of calm speeches and careful wording. They want results, they want boldness, not empty statements." But Crockett's gaze never wavered. She stepped forward slightly, her presence commanding attention without aggression. "Boldness without accountability is chaos masquerading as leadership," she said. "And the public deserves more than anger. They deserve truth." Narration captured the intensity of the ideological battle unfolding. The contrast between Lake's populist rhetoric and Crockett's methodical reasoning, the visual tension of two strong personalities occupying the same space, and the invisible battlefield of public opinion magnified by millions of digital witnesses. Every subtle gesture mattered. Lake's foot tapping, a flick of her wrist, a tense line of her jaw, versus Crockett's deliberate breathing, steady posture, and measured hand movements. The ideological stakes extended beyond the chamber. The confrontation had become a symbolic battle over leadership, ethics, and the responsibilities of public office. Social media analysis exploded with commentary. Some viewers aligned with Lake's call for urgency, seeing passion as proof of connection to the people. Others were captivated by Crockett's unwavering commitment to principle, interpreting restraint as strength. The polarization of opinion mirrored the tension in the room, reflecting a nation divided over method, ideology, and emotional resonance. As the clash continued, the dialogue was interwoven with public and media reactions, creating a layered narrative. "You may call it calm," Lake said, voice rising again, "but people see hesitation as weakness." Crockett's eyes met hers steadily. "And you may call it anger," she replied, "but people see rage without evidence as reckless. Leadership is measured not by volume, but by wisdom and courage." By the chapter's end, the ideological battle had reached a fever pitch. Crockett's composed clarity had transformed from a defensive posture to an offensive one, shaping public perception even as Lake attempted to dominate the narrative through emotional intensity. The stakes were no longer just about a statement. They were about credibility, influence, and the ability to sway millions of viewers weighing every word, every gesture, every strategic pause. The confrontation had become an enduring symbol of discipline versus spectacle, evidence versus emotion, reason versus rage, setting the stage for Crockett's masterful strategic silence and ultimate climactic triumph. The room seemed to hold its breath. Kari Lake's voice had climbed, volume sharp and impatient, each word intended to puncture the calm Crockett had meticulously maintained. Yet Crockett did nothing. She remained still, eyes steady, hands lightly resting on the podium, absorbing the storm rather than responding to it. The silence itself became a weapon, a calculated pause that carried more weight than any retort could. Every reporter, aide, and camera operator felt the shift. The energy of confrontation had become almost unbearable in its stillness. Lake's frustration became visible in subtle ways. A tightening jaw, rapid shifts of weight from one foot to another, the flick of a wrist punctuating words that now seemed almost performative. "Are you even listening?" she demanded, her tone rising, edged with impatience. The room stirred, uncomfortable with the tension, aware that Crockett's silence was intentional, deliberate. It was as if the calm itself were magnifying the volatility of her opponent. Crockett's gaze swept the room slowly, scanning the faces of reporters and colleagues alike. Her eyes met Lake's briefly, a quiet acknowledgement that the moment was under control. The cameras, capturing every angle, lingered on this interaction. The contrast between fiery impatience and measured poise, chaos and calm, spectacle and strategy. Social media feeds exploded with speculation and admiration. Clips of Crockett simply standing, silent yet commanding, were already trending, users noting how restraint itself could dominate a room as effectively as aggression. The narrative shifted to psychological intensity. Silence was no longer absence. It became an instrument of power. Each second Crockett held still, the tension grew exponentially. Lake's words, once cutting, began to echo back on her, highlighting impulsivity over thoughtfulness, spectacle over substance. The chamber, layered with whispers, rustling papers, and the faint hum of live equipment, became a pressure cooker of expectation. Every onlooker felt the invisible weight of Crockett's strategy, letting her opponent's fury expose itself while she maintained unshakable control. Finally, Crockett spoke, her voice low but resonant, cutting through the room like a calm tide after a storm. "We are all accountable for the choices we make and the words we speak," she said, her tone deliberate enough to make each listener lean in. "Actions driven by anger may capture attention for a moment, but integrity endures, far beyond any outburst." The pause between her sentences emphasized her authority, every word carrying weight, every gesture underscoring intention. The camera lingered on Lake, whose agitation now seemed almost transparent in the face of Crockett's unwavering poise. The spectators, both in the room and online, absorbed the scene. The strategic brilliance of silence, the psychological edge of patience, the subtle art of letting emotion reveal itself while reason stands tall. Commentary from analysts amplified the point. True power is often demonstrated not in volume but in calculated restraint. Leadership is sometimes most visible in the moments one chooses not to react. By the chapter's end, the room had shifted. The power balance was palpable. Crockett's silence had done more than silence, it had reframed the confrontation. Lake's fury, once dominating the narrative, now seemed chaotic and unchecked, while Crockett's restraint commanded respect, credibility, and attention. The stage was set for the climactic confrontation, where the culmination of strategic, patience, evidence, and moral authority would confront Lake's aggressive spectacle in a dramatic high-stakes resolution.